Hey everyone, we're going to look at Chapter 2, which is the history of management. As we continue to progress, hopefully you've seen in your textbook that your textbook is divided into 5 sections. You have the introduction to management, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Of course, those last 4 are the critical functions of a manager. Part 1 really continues to give you an overview and in-depth look into what management is. So in chapter 2, what the authors attempt to have you understand is the history of management and why it's important. These are the learning outcomes for chapter 2, understanding and being able to explain how management originated, being able to have an understanding of the different approaches to management, such as scientific, bureaucratic, administrative, human relations management. And then finally, some more recent, I would say, approaches to management, which include operations, information systems, and contingency management. In this exhibit 2.1 here, this goes over some of the historical periods throughout throughout history, and you can see how throughout time there were examples of management thought and practice throughout the different time periods. For example, the earliest recorded instance of information management dates back to ancient Sumer, which is now modern day Iraq, circa 8000 to 3000 BC. But eventually someone figured out that it was a little bit easier to write the symbols with a stylus on a tablet instead of using this apparatus where they move tokens. In the end, the new technology of writing led to more efficient management of the business of Sumerian temples. And then if we go down to the Egyptians era, those pyramids are phenomenal, and they're so intricately made. And a task as enormous as building the Great Pyramids in Egypt was bound to present some practical problems that would lead to the development of management ideas. They also recognized the need for planning, organizing, and controlling. So we can see that the seeds of management had been planted throughout time. Before 1880, business educators taught only basic bookkeeping and secretarial skills, and there were really no published books or articles about management. Bosses were hired and they pretty much made decisions by the seat of their pants, just haphazardly, without any systematic study, thought, or any type of information or data. But this changed with the advent or the beginnings of scientific management, which actually involved thorough study and testing of different work methods so that you could identify the best and the most efficient way to complete a job, and the required implementations of managers following 4 principles. So I want you to be sure to look at Exhibit 2.2 to find these principles, write them down, and bring them to class for extra credit. Frederick W. Taylor, he is known as the father of scientific management, which is a scientific approach to management. He worked for a company, Midville Steel Company, and then he received several promotions. So he started managing those he'd worked with before. Now, when he worked with these gentlemen before in this factory, they practiced something called soldiering, which is actually deliberately restricting output or productivity because they basically felt that they weren't being treated fair, even to the point that they broke the machine sometimes. But Taylor really wanted to do well in his position, in his managerial position, so he came up with a remedy. He developed the scientific management approach. He emphasized that the goal of scientific management was to use a systematic study to find the one best way of doing each type of task. One of his most controversial proposals at that time, believe it or not, was giving rest break to factory workers doing physical labor. We probably take the fact that we get breaks for granted, that it's, law now. But in Taylor's day, factory workers were expected to work without stopping. The husband and wife team of Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, they're best known for their use of motion studies to simplify work. They also made huge contributions to the employment of disabled workers and the field of industrial psychology. And basically what they did is they really studied the motions that went into completing a task. And they found ways to maybe eliminate doing something. Like if something caused you to bend, maybe that they would just implement something where you stood up higher so you wouldn't have to bend. So they eliminated unnecessary movements. Then we also had Henry Gantt. He developed the Gantt chart, which you can also find in your textbook, Exhibit 2-3. He was also a protege and an associate of Frederick W. Taylor. He made significant contributions to management with respect to pay-for-performance plans and the training and development of workers. At about the same time that scientific management was developing, an equally important idea about bureaucratic as well as administrative management were also developing in Europe. German sociologist Max Weber presented a new way to run entire organizations called bureaucratic management. Bureaucracy, which we know now has a negative connotation of red tape, but it was actually developed as an exercise of control on the basis of knowledge, expertise, or experience. Said differently, it required that those who were most qualified for a management position, they were the ones who received the promotion. Other elements characterized the bureaucracy included qualified or qualification-based hiring and merit-based promotion, chain of command and division of labor, impartiality of rules and its application, writing down, keeping things in writing, and then managers actually being separate from the owners. Henry Fayol was an experienced French CEO, and he published numerous ideas about how and what managers should actually do in their jobs. So he was more focused on what what managers did in their jobs. Now, like Taylor and the Gilbreths, Fayol's work was extremely, influenced by his own work experience. However, different from Taylor's ideas changed companies from the shop floor up, whereas Fayol's ideas were shaped by his experience as a CEO. So he looked at really changing companies from top down. So in addition to the 4 functions of management, Fayol also believed that effective management was based on these 14 principles that you see here. Throughout the slides, we've seen that scientific management focuses on improving efficiency, bureaucratic management focuses on using knowledge, fairness, and logical rules and procedures, and administrative management focuses on how and what managers should actually do in their jobs. Now there's a human relations approach to management, which focuses on the people, the most important resource, and particularly the psychological and social aspects of their work. This approach to management sees people not just as extensions of machines, but as valuable organizational resources in their own right. Human relations management holds that people's needs are important and that their efforts, their motivation, and their performance are affected by the work they do and their relationship with their bosses, coworkers, and their work groups. So another way to say this is that efficiency alone is not enough. Organizational success is going to depend on treating workers well. Mary Parker Follett, she developed an approach of integrative conflict resolution. She believed that the best way to deal with conflict was not domination, where one side wins and the other side loses, or compromise, where each side gives up some of what it wants, but integration. She felt that the two desires could coexist. They could be integrated. That means that a solution has been found in which both desires have found a place that neither side has had to sacrifice anything at all. A research study called the Hawthorne Studies was conducted at Western Electric, and I'd really like for you to read about that in that section because it's really kind of interesting. Basically, a work group was put together and different incentives were extended to the workers, and whether it was lighting or it was financial incentives, the productivity of the group continued to increase. And what was taken from this study that it wasn't so much as incentives that did motivating as it was that their ideas were valued, they were consulted about what was important, and they were an adhesive group. They actually gelled. Chester Barnard's management emphasis was on cooperation. He felt that organization occurs whenever two people work together for some purpose, whether it's classmates working together or a group coming together to work for Habitat for Humanity. According to him, the extent to which people willingly cooperate in an organization depends on how workers perceive executive authority and whether they're willing to accept it. And the last four other significant historical approaches to management have all influenced management today. It influences how managers produce goods and services on a daily basis. That's operations management. How they gather and manage the information that they need to understand their business and make good decisions. That's information management. To the extent that they understand how the different parts of the company work together as a whole, that's systems management. And finally, the degree to which they recognize when and where particular management practices are likely to work. So please read Chapter 2. I think you'll find it interesting how management has developed, and we will further discuss in class. Take care.